What's happening, OTT family? It's your boy AJ, also known as Anton McArthur in the Discord. I'm coming to you today to talk a little bit about DIA. This is going to be a really quick video outlining what I see, what jumps out at me right away. So we'll dive right into it. First thing I see, which I've already highlighted, we have two gaps. Two gaps over the past 4 days. I deleted those so I can draw them again just to give you guys some of that visibility. But the first gap was from here to here. And then the very next day, we gapped from here to here. So I'm gonna go ahead and draw these out for you guys, just so you can see what I see. I like to draw those gap zones in there. That was the first one. The second one was here. And then boom. So yeah, two gaps there. I like to give it a little color. So I'm gonna make this red. So it's nice and red, showing that the gap is on the downside. If you ever see gaps on my charts, if it's a gap that should be going to the downside, it's going to be red. If it should be going to the upside, it's going to be green. So this one going here, actually this one going here would have shown that to get back to that gap, it would have been green. But nonetheless, why are these two gaps significant? Because every time DIA gaps, it fills it in the next week or so. So I'm going to go back a little bit and show you what I mean. Let's go here. We gapped down here. This was on June 17th. We gapped down. We immediately filled within the next couple of days. Right here, we gapped up, immediately filled the next day. And that repeats as we continue to move over to the right. So you got a gap here, went up a couple days, within the next week, boom, filled that gap, dropped all the way down. We move over a little more. So you have a couple more gaps. Small gap here, filled it the next day. Small gap here, filled it 4 days later. We got a gap here. It's probably the longest one. I think it took like 9 days to fill, but it filled it here. Then it continued to drop all the way down until it created this gap. What happened with this gap? 3 days later, 3 to 4 days later, it was filled. Tiny gap here. That was filled when we gapped up here. So what I'm seeing is this tiny gap came all the way down. That gap is considered filled because we gapped up into it and filled it here, which was here. And then now that created this gap, dropped all the way down, create this gap, dropped all the way down, filled that gap in 3 days. That was here, filled it here. And then what happens next? We gap up, we gap up. Now, I'm willing to bet that within the next week or two, we're going to see these two gaps get filled. Why? Because DIA has a history of filling gaps. Very simple. And it doesn't have to be overcomplicated. When you're looking at these charts, it doesn't have to be complicated. Some of the most important things, or some of the biggest moves that I've caught, have been simply off of reading gaps and patterns, right? So that's what I wanted to show you guys today, in addition to the ADX trying to cross down under the buyers and sellers. It depends on who comes out on top here. If the sellers or the red line jumps up above the ADX, then we're going to have to feel good about our puts. Because I did get a 349 put for next Friday. So we'll really feel good about our puts if the sellers decide to take over and jump above the ADX and the buyers here. Because that could mean a significant downfall, which could mean we fill both of these gaps and we're happy. Now, the other thing is we have a couple EMAs and EMAs along the way. I was going to say and SMAs, but that's way down here. So one of the EMAs we have is our 50 EMA. So once we fill this gap, we drop down to here. We're probably going to continue dropping until we hit this 50 EMA. The 50 EMA is currently sitting at 347.22. That's my orange line. that is going to act as some support. We're probably going to bounce off of that or play around there for a little bit before we drop down and fill that second gap. What I do think is going to happen is once we fill that second gap, once we fill this second gap here, we're going to bounce. I think we're going to bounce from here and we're going to go higher. So why do I think we're going to bounce? We got 20 EMA here, sitting right around where that gap fill is. And we got the 100 EMA here, sitting right around where that gap fill is. That's double strong support. On top of the fact that you already got the gap fill target, which is also support. So when you tie all of those things together, I do think I lean more toward us dropping, filling both of these gaps, and then bouncing and taking off from there. Now, some things to watch. I do have a 349 put for next week, but I will gladly hop the hell out of it if the buyers decide to jump above the ADX here and go crazy, because that can mean that this momentum is going to continue, and we're going to continue to run up before we drop. That means that we can continue to fill this space until we're at the point where we're really overbought, because there is room on the RSI. So some things to watch, right? We're already trending up on our TTM squeeze. Momentum is showing green. There is a chance that if sellers don't take control here, these gaps can be left in the dust for a little while. I do think shortly after, we'll drop back and fill them. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, hit us in the comments. Make sure you visit optionstradingtycoons.com.